wasn't far from my home. It was as close to my house as Anderson is.
And you live over off of Highway 178?
Yes.
And was Mr. Bright intended to come to this meeting on October 27th?
Yes, he was.
And was it reasonable for you all to travel to the northern part of this county and save Mr. Bright having to travel and charge the county by the hour?
Exactly. It saved the county money, us meeting him there.
Now, the second meeting that y'all had on November 4th, you actually had across the street the historic courthouse, right?
That's correct.
And Mr. Bright traveled for that meeting as well.
Yes.
And you were at that meeting?
I was at that meeting.
And do you recall at that meeting there was a discussion, which is reflected in Mr. Bright's notes, that Mr. Preston would be given something to do that he could not perform and that he would be fired for insubordination? Do you recall that discussion?
Yes, I do.
Tell me the context of that discussion and how it came up.
That was a statement that was attributed to an incoming councilman, Tom Allen, that had defeated me in the election, that we discussed that this was going to be the tactics that the 3 incoming members and 2 incumbent members, Ms. Wilson and Mr. Walter, were going to use in order to fire Mr. Preston for cause.
And the Mr. Allen you're talking about is the council chairman that's been sitting here?
That's correct.
You may not have seen him, he may have left before you came, but he's the current council chairman, right?
That's correct.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about this toxic climate you were talking about. During the course of your service on council, did you get letters that threatened you in any way?
Yes, I did. There were letters sent to myself and some other members of the council saying that Joey was going to prison, we were going to prison, we were going to be sodomized, that it was just all kinds of terrible things were going to happen to us because of the way we were conducting the county business.
And I'm going to show you one that's been marked as Defendants 133. Do you recognize that document, sir?
Yes, I do.
Is that a letter you personally received?
Yes, it is.
I believe that's an exhibit. Not agreeing with this one.
All right, let's lay the foundation for it then. Mr. McAbee, is that a letter that you personally received?
Yes, it is.
And how did you receive that letter?
Through the mail.
And were those some of the threats that you were getting both verbally and in writing?
Yes, it is.
And did that match some of the things that other council members were saying happened to you?
Yes, in fact, it matched some of the letters that I saw that other council members had received.
Your Honor, to admit that as Defendant's Exhibit 133?
And our objection to this is relevance.
Your Honor, it goes to the toxic.
Well, do you want to argue that point? Ma'am, you wish to argue that point?
Yes, Your Honor. It goes to relevance. It's hearsay, foundation. It has nothing to do with the issues in the case.
She's claiming it violates hearsay and it's not relevant, so I'll hear from you. Ma'am.
Your Honor, we're not putting it forth for the truth of the matter asserted that Mr. McAbee would be put in prison, that he would be buggered in prison. We're putting it into evidence for the purpose of this toxic political climate. But what was happening is these council members were getting threats from the people that supported Ms. Wilson and her group, and that he felt threatened, other council members felt threatened, and that's the kind of toxic political climate that when they voted on November 18th, they voted to rip the Band-Aid off and try to make the county move on.
I think you're saying it goes to his state of mind?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
It is a letter from March of 2006, Your Honor. I believe you heard plenty of argument about how that was too early to go back. And it's from an unidentified anonymous.
Ma'am, I'll let you go back there.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right,
You can go back to the
allow you.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Mr. McAbee, in February of 2008, did you receive a copy of a letter from Mr. Thompson that was to Sheriff Crenshaw and copied to all county council members?
Yes, I did.
And as a result, of the letter that you received, which is Defendants 133, and the letters from Mr. Thompson, was there any state or local law enforcement investigation as a result of that?
Yes, the sheriff told me that he was looking into it.
And are you aware of any investigation by SLED regarding the letter that you got back in March of 2006?
Yes, in fact, Special Agent Kenyon, I think they're called special agents, came to my office and collected this letter and questioned me about this letter, and also a credit card receipt I had received from Ms. Wilson at the same time. I mean, I had received it, he questioned me about it at the same time.
Okay. And was SLED ever able to determine who these people were that were making threats to sitting elected officials about being buggered and sodomized and put in jail?
No, not to my knowledge.
Did those threats continue during your term on council?
Yes.
Have they continued since you came off of council?
I have not received anything like this since I left office.
Okay. Have you had any verbal threats that have been verbalized on the radio against you and your family?
Yes.
I want to back up a little bit to some questions that Ms. Perrin asked you about the bond issue. Now, with regard to the bond issue, you actively sought an ethics opinion about that, right?
Yes, I did.
And after that ethics opinion was issued and the actual votes were taken on by the council about fee and lieu's for Lincoln Energy, you recused yourself, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
How many times did you recuse yourself?
Relating to that particular property, there were 3 votes on the fee and lieu ordinance, 1 vote on the resolution to offer the inducement agreement, and then there were 3 votes on the Lewis Drive Road closing. And so relating to that property, there would have been a total of 7 recusals.
And I'm going to show you the ones that we pre-marked as Defendants Exhibit 58. You tell me if you recognize that document.
Yes, I do.
And are those your recusals?
Yes, they are.
Tell me what a recusal entails.
A recusal is more than just abstaining. You don't remain in the room while the debate takes place. You don't participate in debate. At the beginning of the time the matter is taken up, you first of all file this form prior to the meeting. At the beginning of the time the council is taking up the matter, you state to the chairman that you are conflicted and leave the chambers until such time as the matter is completed.
And in each of those times you recused yourself, you left the chambers, right?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Perrin also asked about the commission that you received, which was Plaintiff's Exhibit 60, I believe. And I think you testified that that was the only commission you've ever received.
That's correct.
So you didn't share in any of the referral fees that Ms. Plummer received from the properties out of the airport, did you?
No.
And is it fair to say that the airport expansion have been a topic of discussion in Anderson County since the early 90s?
Yes, the county had an industrial park out there, and that over the years they had been expanding the park, expanding their holdings for the industrial park, and had also been buying properties under the glide paths of the runway. The FAA had been encouraging airports to do that.
And do you recall, as someone actively involved in economic development, that Heather Simmons Jones, as the economic development director, actually recommended that the property that was purchased at the airport that Ms. Plummer got a referral fee on be purchased?
I don't recall that, but it wouldn't surprise me to learn that she had, because it was a good buy for the county.
And were there other real estate agents that were also watching this situation at the airport and trying to list properties around there as well?
Yes, there were.
And that was kind of general knowledge in the community. Wasn't anything specific that was a secret, was it?
Right. Airports have been expanding in most communities their property holdings around there. sites for years, and it's a great place for an industrial site. You don't have the problems if you build residential there of complaints about plane noise and that sort of thing.
And when you testified, and I'm going to move back a little bit, back to these expenditures. When you testified that Mr. Preston signed off on these expenditures, did he have any ability to tell you, no, Mr. Councilmember, you can't go?
No, that's not to my understanding. He had no authority to say that.
Was he your boss?
No.
Who was his boss?
The council.
So if there was a problem with an expenditure, could he say, you're missing receipts, you got to turn these in before I pay them? But he couldn't tell you couldn't go, could he?
And that's my understanding, that he couldn't direct us, and I wouldn't expect him to. I was a councilman.
And you were one of his bosses, right?
Yes.
And when you did have missing receipts for reimbursements, did you get a memo that said, hey, you got to turn these in before we can pay this?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 57. Do you recognize that document, sir?
Yes, I do.
And you're kind of bad at keeping up with receipts, aren't you?
I am, unfortunately.
So you get those memos and you have to turn all that in before you get your reimbursement, right?
That's correct.
Would it be a fair statement to say that Mr. Preston signing off on those expenditures as the county administrator was just a ministerial function?
Yes, that'd be a fair statement.
I want to go back to the advice that Mr. Bright was giving you about the severance and the settlement. Now, you said that there was concern because of another case where he litigated on behalf of Anderson County. Can you expand on that a little bit for me, make me understand that, please?
Yes, there was the case where Jackie Hunter had sued Anderson County for wrongful termination. Mr. Bright represented Anderson County in that, had assured the county that they felt like he had a strong case, and he lost it.
Do you recall how much the verdict was?
I believe it was around $300,000.
And that didn't include Mr. Bright's fee, did it?
No, it didn't.
And that case went all the way to a jury trial?
Yes, it did.
Mr. Hunter still works for the county today, doesn't he?
Well, he is an elected official in the county. He's the auditor.
Did you have concerns based on your knowledge of that about the assessment that Mr. Bright made to the county of the Jackie Hunter case?
I did. My concern was that, and that was because of his assessment in the Jackie Hunter case, and the fact that in this case he was saying that I discounted the weight I gave to his recommendations of our ability to win at trial. I felt like that we could end up paying Ogletree and Mr. Bright a lot of money and lose the case, and it would be, pursuing it would end up costing the county $2 million.
Were there non-monetary considerations also?
Yes, we could finally end this bitterness in Anderson County between Cindy Wilson and her focus on Mr. Preston and trying to get rid of him. I thought it might help heal the county if we just put this behind us finally in 2008.
When you voted on the severance on November 18th of 2008, did you ever dream that Anderson County would spend over $2.5 million trying to get back $1.14 million?
Objection, Your Honor. Foundation.
Sorry?
Foundation, Your Honor.
Does the county dispute they spent over $2.5 million?
That is not relevant to this case, Your Honor.
Well, I'll let you ask some foundation questions before I make a ruling as to what his knowledge might be of the current situation.
Mr. McAbee, you're a pretty politically astute gentleman, aren't you?
I'd like to think so. Although after my defeat in 2008, I wonder about that sometimes.
You read a lot.
Yes.
You stay very politically up to date on what's going on in the county and in politics.
Yes.
Have you followed the expenditures of Anderson County as disclosed by the county in media sources?
Yes, I have.
And following what's been disclosed by the county and media sources about how much they have paid in prosecuting these matters, what is your understanding of how much they have paid in prosecuting this case against Mr. Preston and investigating it?
According to the Anderson Independent, it's $2.3 million.
Your Honor, that's hearsay as well. And it's also.
She asked what his understanding was. He did not answer the question. You asked the question.
What is your understanding, Mr. McAbee, sitting here today, about what you believe the county has spent?
$2.3 million.
Your Honor, I'd just like to make the objection that this whole issue is completely irrelevant to the issues in this case.
Overruled. Hearsay.
As a political fiscal conservative, Mr. McAbee, did you ever envision when you voted for Mr. Preston's severance that the county would spend over 2 times that to try to recoup it?
No. I looked at it and saw that we could end up spending $2 million on this case, and I felt like being able to settle it for 1.2 or 1.14, as it turns out, would be a good deal. It eliminates the upside risk.
And that upside risk has to date from the past.
Yes.
Now, when you voted on the severance on the night of November 18th of 2008, I believe you and other council members had said that you didn't receive the severance agreement prior to that meeting.
That's correct.
And were you aware that the last revision of that severance agreement was sent to Ms. Wilson an hour and 6 minutes before the meeting started?
I didn't realize that was when it was. I knew it was just very soon before the meeting.
Okay. And you skimmed this before the meeting, right?
Yes.
And if I understood your testimony correctly, it was you were worried about the numbers.
Yes.
And did you have an understanding that in addition to the numbers, that in exchange for Mr. Preston and the county having a divorce, what you thought was an amicable divorce at the time, but having a divorce, that he was releasing all his claims, including potential tort claims against Cindy Wilson and Bob Waldrop?
Yes.
And at that time, as a member of the Personnel Committee, you'd received Mr. Hoskins' letter where there was an assertion that there were tort claims potentially against Mr. Wilson and Ms. Waldrop.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson and Mr. Waldrop. You get my pronouns correct here.
Yes.
Okay. And did Ms. Wilson vote on this severance?
Yes, she did.
And did Mr. Waldrop vote on this severance?
Yes, he did.
They didn't recuse themselves the way you did when it came to Lincoln Energy, did they?
No, they didn't.
And as a person who has over 20 years experience in public matters and on boards, do you believe they should have recused themselves?
Had I been in their situation, I would have.
But they were financially interested in this severance, right? Because if it passed, Ms. Wilson wouldn't have to get her homeowner's insurance to defend her again, would she?
That is correct.
And Mr. Waldrop wouldn't have to hire an attorney and then get the county to pay for that later, would he?
No.
Did Mr. Preston offer you anything in exchange for your vote on November 18th of 2009?
No.
Last, I want to ask you about the agenda on November 18th of 2008, this plaintiff's exhibit 4. Do you recall the agenda from that night, sir?
Yes, somewhat.
take a moment and re-familiarize yourself with it. Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Was there an item on the agenda that gave the public notice that the appointment of Mr. Preston would be taken up at that meeting?
I would say so, yes.
What is that item?
Number 16, discussion of the authority of county council to employ the administrator.
And with regard to that item, could the discussion of the severance have come up under that, even though it was Mr. Waldrop's item?
I would assume so, yes.
And with regard to the vote about calling the question, if the question hadn't been called, debate would have naturally ended at some point, the vote would have been taken, right?
Yes.
I appreciate you being here with us today, Mr. McAbee. I'm going to collect those exhibits from you as Sunday. My exhibits. Thank you.
And did you get the new exhibit?
The new one, the new one is paying.
I just wanted to be sure you weren't taking it back.
No, sir, I haven't used
That
it.
whatever was admitted stays up here.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, mine don't have any stickers on.
I don't want us to lose exhibits in other places.
Yes, sir. I think mine are all copies.
Okay, all right.
This has no number on it.
That was the one that's parented. Telly, did you admit this ordinance, or did you just give it to him for recollection?
All right, you may redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McAbee, you were asked if anything prevented you from being reappointed to the Anderson County Economic Development Board after your term, is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you were never reappointed, were you?
I was not.
And you have not served since 2008, correct, in any capacity?
No.
Ms.